All right. Thank you, Dr. Ashikur Rahman. I'm really glad that you have organized such a excellent uh, lecture series and for giving me the opportunity to present my research over here. And you have already introduced and provided my profile, so I'm not going to elaborate on that, but probably I'll be going a little bit on my profile and my current affiliation at Curtin before going into my research, and then I'll be also discussing about my future research and collaboration with other organizations in terms of like academic institutions and also the local government agencies in Australia and abroad. So before going into uh, like details, I'll be uh, first would like to mention some kind of like guiding principles that I always follow in my education career and also my kind of like teaching career. Um, this has been quoted from uh, Journal of Planning, Education and Research, published in 1987. This is a remarkable kind of model that I always inspired by. It's provided by Jeremy Kaufman, and he provided a nice three angle principles that it has critical importance in planning, education, research, and practice. So by strategy, ethics, and boundary spanning, I kind of like follow these principles in my all of my research and teaching activities. So strategy is basically that means is that we as a planner we have to uh, kind of think some optimum solution. We always need to find some strategies to solve the wicked problems that we commonly refer the planning problems like as uh, kind of like wicked problems. um, we need to be ethicist because we have the kind of like great opportunity as well as responsibility. I would suggest that we need to provide the resources in a more equitable manner so that like we can serve the community. And finally, the boundary spanning, I refer to the communication skills and community engagement that is very important for planners to maintain to make a more sustainable outcome of the planning activities. So these are the three guiding principles that I follow, and I try to kind of reflect in my teaching and all my research activities. Currently, as Dr. Ashik mentioned already, I'm currently doing kind of coordinating the entire graduate studies program. So we have around like 130 PhD researchers over here in the School of Design and Built Environment, and in around 9 cognate areas, including urban and regional planning, uh, architecture, project management, sustainability policy institute. So it's a quite wide range of cognate areas that we teach and host research in these areas. I'm currently the acting course coordinator of urban and regional planning course, and kind of like maintaining relation with the industries and also ensuring the teaching and research engagement in the department. So now I would like to move on my research presentation. This is one of the kind of research projects that I'm currently engaged in. And uh, Before going into that, I would like to acknowledge my other colleagues who are also engaged in this research, and also other two city councils that they are helping me in providing some funding and resources, and they are kind of like hosting my research in their community. So I deeply acknowledge their contribution in my research. So today I'm going to uh, tell a story about the Australian citizenship. Um, this is a great and unique kind of characteristic that every Australian citizens upholds. This is called the Great Australian Dream. Is a dream of owning a home of on a quarter acre block with like 600 to 700 square meter large backyard, which and access to parks and playgrounds. So this is a dream of every Australian citizen to have this kind of bigger house and having the large backyard to have their all kind of like parties and events in house. This is kind of like a unique dream of Australian people over here, and that is perfectly fit with the low density, quiet suburban life. And this is like a contribution to the kind of larger house. And if you look into the different house size around the world, you'll find that Australian houses are much bigger than any other countries in the world. And you'll find that it's one of the highest size, around like 214 square meter, the entire household, and probably the floor space per capita is like 89 square meter, which is higher than any other countries around the world. So the dream is contributing physically a bigger house, large house, and kind of like large lot size in a low density suburbs. And this is further contributing to the kind of like everlasting saga. And in the picture, you'll see that the typical lot size in Australian suburbs with large backyard, swimming pool, and lots of spaces, personal space, uh, like these are very common in Australian suburbs. And current research from University of Queensland also suggests that this is not within the Australian community as such, but a large number of people who are migrating to this country, and obviously from like China and Taiwan, they are very much familiar with the very high density apartment living. But when they are moving into this country, they are kind of like fascinated by this kind of great Australian dream. And the research suggests that they are also kind of like aspiring this kind of bigger lot size and quarter acre blocks when they think about buying new home. So this is kind of like going on and on in Australian life. And it has contributed, you can see in the picture that it's kind of like endless urban sprawl. um, the city is like dispersed, and in the middle you can see the CBD over here, but the suburbs are kind of like sprawling everywhere on a space, and it's very low density, mostly one story buildings around, like across the city you'll find it's kind of like very much low density, and not um, near to the, like if you think about Dhaka city or Khulna city, it's far away. So there are some issues of urban sprawling. This sprawling has been kind of like referred to as a curse of urbanizations in some places, and it contributed to lack of housing diversity because of the Australian dream. Many people in Australia, they just love to live in single detached house. So single detached house, you can see in the picture, is a kind of like standing alone house, not sharing any kind of facilities or services, and it's kind of like uh, wide single house, and it's called green title, that is owned by individual person, and there is no sharing in any kind of like services and facilities. So it obviously like accumulates higher cost in terms of infrastructure provision whenever you like sprawl and go far from the city center or central business district. the government has to provide you other facilities, roads and electricity and other kind of like shopping and medical facilities. So obviously the cost is higher, and it also contributes into the unsustainable or ecological footprint, because it's like um, sprawling everywhere with the cost of nature. So this is something like going on and on Australian housing sector. So this is like an historical map. It's showing the urban footprint from 1925 to 2012. So in the first map, you can see that it's just 25-kilometer urban footprint from north to south, and now ended up with 150 kilometer in 2012. So it's one of the low dense city around the world, like 4.9 and 10.8 dwellings per hectare. And this is not just it's naturally grown, but I would suggest that there are mainly two factors that are responsible for this kind of like low density cities and having the urban sprawl in Perth metropolitan area. The Perth metropolitan area is the capital city of Western Australia, and it's located close to Asia. It's like whenever you see the map of Australia, like Sydney, Melbourne are on the eastern coast, and Perth is located in the western coast. And also, we call it the kind of like most isolated city in the world, because there are no bigger cities located close to the Perth metropolitan area. So there are two things that are contributing into the low density kind of like urban structure in this city. It's mainly the strategic planning, and the other is the residential design codes, also known as the kind of like zoning regulations. So first we talk about the strategic metropolitan that Perth City experienced so far. So the first plan came into practice in 1955, and then it came through the like 1970 and 1990, and it's kind of like they all was in favor of low density urban growth. And now in 2015, the latest metropolitan plan is more encouraging the kind of urban consolidation or urban infill to promote higher density in this country. The other factor that is responsible for low density in this metropolitan area is residential design code. So residential design code stipulates the average and minimum size. So for an example, it's kind of like a zoning regulation. So and it is practiced by local government, because they provide the approval for new buildings, residential buildings. So Act 20, that means that you are permitted to build 20 dwellings per hectare with an average lot size of 450 square meter, and the lowest you can do like 350 square meter. So by the regulations, you're kind of like bound to have the larger lot size. So you really are not permitted to build on a smaller lot size or go higher for density. Um, just quickly looking into the other kind of like the problem context is that in one hand, the government is promoting is now recently promoting urban consolidation, higher density. But on the other hand, the great Australian dream, where the community just favor the kind of like large blocks and bigger houses. So there is a bit of like kind of like disjunctions between the government and the community and also the developers. So everybody is not convinced by the current policy regulations that are promoting high density, because the community does not want. So we need to find a way to increase the density while satisfying the consumers and developers. So that kind of dilemma is going through in our urban kind of discourse. So looking into the more theoretical aspects is like urban infill as a necessary means to fix a sprawling city. So that's the kind of like key determinant of the policy formulation in the recent time of the government. But obviously there is disjunction between strategic and statutory policies, because the government, the state government is for the high density development, but the local government who apply the residential design code, these are restricted. That does not allow higher density at local level. So that's kind of like mismatch between the state government and local government in terms of like subdivision and achieving higher density in the local areas. Looking into more planning history, you'll find that uh, restriction on lot sizes is not very new. You'll find the concept of burgages in the in England in terms of the design of medieval towns, which later transplanted to the colonial cities. And this kind of burgages is mainly the concept was used to kind of like analyze the layout of the lots during the medieval towns. And this is like kind of like very restricted and cannot be changed for a longer period of time. But that has been changed over time because of the economic recession and economic development. There are some kind of like bigger forces and that in fact finally pushed the residential market to kind of like ease the restriction on lot size. There are some other literature that suggests more like social explanatory purview of binding zoning regulations. In the US, you will find that there are many evidence that they try to maintain the low density residential areas, and this is because they did not allow the low income class to get into the kind of the suburban area, because the suburban area was that time perceived as the area for the richer people. So they put higher restriction with a larger lot size so that they can allow they could kind of like the low class could not get into the suburban area with high density apartments living. Um, it also kind of like ended up with poor subdivision when there is a kind of like a rush in subdividing the land. And we will see that in many suburbs in Perth, you'll see that very irregular shaped of lots, like this is called like battle X lot. You can see that it looks like a battle X. So this is basically, it was a large lot, and then it was further subdivided to fit two houses into that. And the house in front is still getting the frontage, but the house in the like newly constructed house behind got the very narrow entrance over there, looks like a battle X. So this kind of like irregular shaped house or design outcome may happen due to the poor implementation of urban consolidation policies. There are obviously a lot of community concerns because people really don't like higher density in their neighborhood. This is because of many reasons, that there is a perceived risk of kind of like changing characteristics of the neighborhood, or maybe higher traffic congestion. There could be different reasons. MEES also cautioned that increasing density might significantly raise demands for service provision. There are some other reports that they are showing that the community is so scarce that they think that, oh, someone is coming to my neighborhood and their socioeconomic condition is unknown. So we better don't allow higher density to get a mix of diversity of people in our community. So there are a lot of community concerns are reported in the literature. So having this wicked problems, and on one hand there is consolidation policies, on the other hand community wants a uh, like bigger lots and wide suburban life, low density suburban life. So this research is basically to kind of like test a new housing product, which is getting a bit of popular in East Coast, but not that much in Perth metropolitan area. So we are thinking about to kind of like test the product which is called the small lot product or micro lots. This is basically a single lot, lot and single house built on a very smaller kind of lot size, which is like 100 or 80 square meters, so really small. And it could be a two-story house or one-story house. But so how like it is filling the gap is that allow maintaining the Australian dream of independent lifestyle and to single family detached housing. On the other hand, it's helping us to achieve the objective of urban consolidation policies. So it's kind of like balancing, and it's kind of creating win-win situation where both parties can be satisfied. But we know that straight away people will not allow to implement high density living. So we are kind of like thinking about some trade-offs. That trade-offs is like whether the community will accept the small lot house, whether it is located close to CBD or it is located within a very quiet and safe suburbs, or they are after like well-designed house, so they are not bothered about like where it is located. So these are, we call it like trade-offs. So on the basis of which they can kind of accept the idea of small lot housing. So we are going to experiment this kind of trade-offs in our research. So just aware about the timing, quickly moving on. I'm not going to give the details of research methodology, but we adopted a mixed method approach, and basically we conducted a social media survey of 530 responses we received and from the consumers, and we interviewed about like 20 planners and developers, and then we come up with some rank order analysis, factor analysis, and order logic modeling just to test our the trade-offs and experiment like which one is accepted mostly by the community if we try to apply the small lot housing. So this rank order analysis shows that it's a bit of like comparison between the components within the house and outside the house. So we are talking about, we asked the question about which is the most important component within the house. So it's like backyard, architectural design, location, entertainment, alfresco, garden, number of bedrooms, those kind of elements within the house. We also asked question about the surrounding area, which is the most important to them in terms of the suburban characteristics. So parks and recreational facilities, diverse land use, safety, street kind of like liveliness and vitality, public transport options. So this kind of like looking into which is the most important component in their life. So in this experiment, we found that location stand out, like they really like highlighted the importance of location of the house. And on the other hand, in terms of the suburban characteristics, they highlighted the safety issues is the most important when they select a house for buying. So like across the research, we are thinking about the first ownership. So buying a house for the first time, we are not thinking about renting or maybe second time buying or that kind of thing. So this research is mainly focused on first home buyers. Then move into kind of like cross-checking the trade-offs, which one really they is kind of like they influence the community to go for a small lot housing that can create a higher density, but they can still maintain their the individual home ownership. So we found that it's not surprising. like 34% disagreement. They don't want a smaller lot. They kind of like dead against the smaller lot house. So we then tried with the factor one, which is center preference. If the house is located close to the CBD or any secondary towns or activity center, they really want to accept it. So as a trade-off, if the house is located close to the activity center or secondary towns, they will prefer that kind of location. And the other hand, 47% agreement towards good and safe neighborhoods. So these are the two factors that really work to find out where is the win-win situation we can create, or we can create a balance between these kind of like different factors. Later, we also tried with ordered logic model to see if there is any socioeconomic demographic variables impact on their the housing characteristics. So we saw that like elder group, they really love alfresco and gardens, relatively the younger one. That means that we can try more like higher density kind of living with younger people, because they are kind of like ready to accept this kind of living in the metropolitan area. So further interview with the planners, we got some really interesting um, uh, kind of like ideas and some explanation that we are looking for. So it has been identified that local governments are trying to maintain the large residential areas with the quite low residential densities, which is very much in contrast with the statewide policy for density, higher density living. And then the local government are quite relaxed, kind of like the reluctant to apply this kind of like high density policies. So the planners, obviously, they suggest that we need to review our residential design code to accept kind of like smaller kind of lots. So if you can remember that I mentioned about R20, which is a very low density, so we can go for like R40 or R60, which will allow more smaller lots to develop and smaller size houses. So probably the local government should think about if they can accept that kind of higher residential design code so that we can achieve a more densely kind of like suburban life. Performance-based regulation, so the design should be more flexible, cannot be restricted like the medieval towns, what we saw in planning history. We need to change a lot to accept this kind of new design ideas. And they obviously suggested that this is more like urban product. So small lot housing or micro lot housings are more like urban product. And this should be located close to the central business district and not be appropriate for like distant suburbs or kind of fringe areas. Finally, we got some very valuable comments from the developers who mainly are involved in the construction industries. They said that like in terms of business cases, 150 square meter or 80 square meter houses can be possible to build and to supply in the market, but we need sort kind of like regulatory incentives. For an example, like we can come up with higher floor space ratio, or we can provide zero setback for who are willing to accept the smaller lot size. We can have this kind of regulatory incentives. Um, Production cost obviously a bit higher in this case, so we need to find out how we can minimize the cost. And then amenities should be at doorstep. So if you can remember the Australian, Great Australian Dream, where you have the large backyard, but when you move into a smaller lots, you are obviously losing your large backyard and amenities. So the the local government should provide uh, a kind of alternative. So the amenities or parks and playgrounds should be at doorstep. So we need to find out the way how we can still maintain the outdoor more active, so that people are still can have that kind of activities outside their house. Incentive-based requirements for infill. This is kind of interesting idea that they suggested that we can apply the small lot housing, and probably we can allow for higher stories in the form, for an example, like if they are willing to retain the mature trees in the lot. So they are against the clearing the lots. So if you maintain or don't cut the mature trees in the lot while you're building your house, then you will get some benefits from the local government organization. So this kind of like interesting thoughts we got from the developers. This is are something like we can get. So finally, the learning points are small lot house can be achieved as an alternative, creating balance between the Great Australian Dream and the urban consolidation policies. But obviously, we need to go some extra mile to get some incentives or maybe flexible design codes that we need to find out. So some future research agenda is that we need to spend some effort in technological innovation in construction materials, activating informal open space. As I said, like we are losing the backyard, so we need to find out some ways so that we can active informal open space. We have a lot of mono-use playgrounds, so open playground, and we are now thinking like how to kind of redesign those playgrounds and have more activities in there. Obviously, like I'm like towards the end of my presentation. So this is some example that from the previous research, we are coming into some demand-driven research. So currently I'm working with the city of Bayswater and city of Bassendean to find out that active informal space. So we are looking into the verges, the space in front of the houses, which is owned by the council. This is sort of like a courtyard where we can activate, and we are going through a number of research on there, and also how to activate the future like the parks of the local government areas. So there are some kind of like research going on there to activate and creating more interesting areas for the community so that they can accept smaller lots with higher density. So this is kind of end. This paper has been published in Urban Policy and Research. So if you are interested, probably you can have a look for more details into that, and you will find all the references in that article. So that's probably it from me. So over to Ashik.